Hello students. So we are continuing with history chapter Rise of Nationalism in Europe. So we had done the French Revolution and the idea of nation. We had read about the Napoleonic Code. Now we'll move on to the next topic, that is the making of nationalism in Europe. Now how did nationalism which had developed France spread to other parts of Europe? So first we'll come back again to the map which we had discussed last time. Now this map, if you can see, there was no nation in 1815. So whatever the nations developed, they developed after 1815. And if you see this, they're all big empires: Russian empires, Austrian empire, Ottoman empire, and the British empire. All these were empires. There was no nation into it. Now coming to the notes, first point. In Europe, rulers had their autonomous territories. Autonomous, yeah, means the territory was not controlled and it was huge. People had no collective identity as a common culture. This means that the people did not share any collective identity, but they were under one empire, that is all. And one such empire which was very big during this time was the Austrian-Hungary Empire under the dynasty Habsburg, and it was also called the Habsburg Empire. The dynasty ruling during that period was the Habsburg Austria-Hungary. Now coming to, in Hungary, half of the population spoke Magyar, which while the other half of the spoke a variety of dialects. Now this area was again under the empire, Austrian-Hungary Empire, and there were lots of different languages spoken in different parts. So there was no connectivity between all the people. Different groups lived within the boundaries of the empire. The only tie binding these groups together was a common alliance to the empire. That is all, nothing else, not even the language. They spoke different languages, they were from different ethnic groups, so there was no connectivity other than only being that they were under a single empire. Now coming to the different classes during this period in Europe. The next topic is the aristocracy and the middle class. So now first we'll talk about which classes were present in Europe during this time. Aristocracy. Now this was a high class landlords, but the population was less. That means they were less in number. It was a dominant class. It was ruling class mostly, and it was dominating other classes. They were united by a common way of life. Their lifestyle was, and they were connected by ties of marriages. All the people in aristocracy were related to one another. Next class is the peasantry, which was a landless, low class. They did not have any land. They were working for the landlords. Then it was more in population and it had no rights. So they were living a... Now coming to the other class, that is the new middle class. This was a new class which emerged other than aristocracy and the peasantry, the new middle class. With industrialization, towns and commercial classes emerged. Now with industrialization, which began in England and spread to other parts of the European countries, towns emerged, new classes emerged. These classes were educated industrialists, businessmen, professionals, and working class population, and they all together came to be called liberal middle classes. Now these liberal middle classes will pay, now this liberal middle class will be playing a major role in all the revolutions in Europe. That is from 1930s to 1948 and later on in unification of Italy, Germany, etc. Under liberals, ideas of abolition of aristocratic privileges gained popularity. Now what did liberal nationalism stand for? In the early 19th century, Europe was closely aligned to the ideology of liberalism. The term liberalism derives from Latin root liber, meaning free. So liberalism is standing for liberty, freedom. That means free and no control of the state should be on the people. Liberalism stood for freedom for the individual and equality of all before law. It emphasized the concept of government by consent. That is, the government should be elected by the people and the government should have the consent of the people. A constitution and representative government through parliament. So the elected government will be elected on the basis of a constitution and it will be a representative government of the people. The right to vote and to get elected was exclusively to property owning men. So People without property were not having any right to vote. Men without property and all women were excluded from political rights. So that means all women, even women having property, were not having political rights. Women and non-propertied men and women organized opposition movements demanding equal rights. So rights. In the economic sphere, now, liberalism stood for freedom of market and the abolition of state-imposed restriction on the movement of goods and capital. So now, liberalism for economic development, it demanded that there should be no restriction on the market, on the goods being movement of the goods, and the government should abolish all these restrictions if there are any. During the 19th century, this was a strong demand of the emerging middle class. So this emerging middle class, which was a new class in the society, the new commercial classes argued for the creation of a unified economic territory allowing the unhindered movement of goods, people and capital. Now next, in 1834, a customs union or Zollverein was formed at the initiative of Prussia and joined by most of the German states. Now to understand this, we will go back to the map in the chapter. Now this, if you can see this, Prussia played a major role when unification of Germany will be studying. So this was also an empire, and the areas next to this, there is no Germany. We should note out here, there is no Germany as a nation here. They are all small states. So these all small states in 1834 united and formed a custom union. Custom unions means that there is, if they form a group, that means they will be removing the restrictions of movement of goods, and this custom union came to be known as Zollverein. Many times questions have been asked on this, and it was joined by most of the German states, whichever the initiative of Prussia, and this came to be known as Zollverein. The union abolished tariff barriers and reduced the number of currencies from over 30 to 2. So that means tariff barriers were restriction on movement of goods. They were abolished in Zollverein, and they were having different currencies. Now all the other currencies were abolished and only two kept. For example, if you see now in the European Union, they are having a single currency known as euro. Earlier what was happening, that different countries were having their own currencies, but to have an economic progress, all the European countries coming in the European Union have adopted a single currency, that is euro. So it is almost a similar step which was earlier in 1834. The introduction of railways stimulated mobility, enhancing economic interest to national unification. So what is happening now, as the railways were introduced, mobility of the people started to move from one place to another in a fast time and in a large numbers. Economic interest that can only be fulfilled when a nation is developed. So every person, whenever there was any nation unification, all the people supported this view. Now we come to the next topic, that is a new conservation after 1815. So what is happening around 1815, when the Napoleonic War, which was against the liberal class, that emerged. So now we're going to talk about what was that order. Following the defeat of Napoleon in 1815, European governments were driven by the spirit of conservatism. They tried to follow the old tradition, and slowly they want to make any changes in the society, whereas the liberals wanted to change everything in a fast movement. So conservatism was against liberalism. Conservatives believed that the monarchy, the church, social hierarchies, property and the family should be preserved. So what did the conservatives believe? That there should be kings, there should be no nation, and that means that there is no equality in the society. Social hierarchies should be maintained, that means, and the property should be owned by only a few, and all family values, all these should be preserved, and this was the main objectives of the conservatives. So they are against liberalism. They realized from the changes initiated by Napoleon that a modern army, an efficient bureaucracy, a dynamic economy, the abolition of feudalism and serfdom could strengthen the autocratic monarchies of Europe. So now understood that The initiative which Napoleon had started, these are required. And if you want to save your monarchy, you need to have a modern army, an efficient bureaucracy, a dynamic economy, and so on. So you have to give some rights to the people to save your monarchical form of government. And now we come to the Treaty of Vienna of 1850. This was the treaty signed after the Battle of Waterloo. In 1815, the European powers, Britain, Russia, Persia, and Austria, who had collectively defeated Napoleon, met at Vienna. Vienna is a city in Austria to draw up a settlement for Europe. The Congress was hosted by Austrian Chancellor Duke Metternich. That means the biggest empire during this period was Austrian-Hungary Empire under the Habsburg dynasty, and its chancellor Duke Metternich. Now this person, we will be studying about him. He has a few of a role in this chapter, so we need to understand who he is. He is the chancellor, Australian chancellor, and he hosted, that means he was the head of this Treaty of Vienna. The delegates drew up the Treaty of Vienna of 1815. The terms of the treaty were, this is very important, many times if the Napoleon Code does not come, then the Treaty of Vienna comes in the exam, mostly. This has been the trend for the last 5 to 6 years. Now what were the terms? The Bourbon dynasty was restored to power in France. Now this Bourbon dynasty was ruling before the French Revolution started. So when the French Revolution started, the king was executed and the monarchical form of government ended. So when in 1815 Napoleon was defeated, France lost the territories it has annexed under Napoleon. So whichever area Napoleon had won, that was again given back to those rulers, and France was what was before the French Revolution. Now a series of states was set up on the boundaries of France to prevent France expansion in future. So now small boundaries, states have been established on France border. That means whenever France will try to attack any country, it will first come to attack these small states, and by the time France is having wars with these small states, all these big empires will come to help. Now the Kingdom of Netherlands was set up in the north. Vienna was added to Piedmont in the south. Persia was given new territories on its western frontiers. Austria was given control of northern Italy, but the German Confederation of 39 states that had been set up by Napoleon was left untouched. Russia was given parts of Poland. Persia was given a portion of Saxony. The main intention was to restore the monarchies that had been overthrown by Napoleon and create a new conservative order in Europe. So that means they did not want the liberalism idea to spread. They wanted a monarchical form of government everywhere in Europe, and there should be no nation building. Conservative regimes set up in 1815 were autocratic. That is, they were not having any restrictions. It was absolute. Autocratic did not tolerate criticism and dissent and sought to curb activities that questioned the legitimacy of autocratic government. So the liberal nationalists criticized the new conservative order and took up the issue of freedom of press. Now the press should be free and should be allowed to write about the negatives and the positives of the government. Now we come to the next topic, that is the revolutionaries. After 1815, the fear of repression drove many liberal nationalists underground. Now, so what? After 1815, when the monarchical form of government was again set up under the conservatives, these liberal nationalists, so they went underground. Revolutionaries at this time meant a commitment to oppose monarchical form and to fight for liberty and freedom. So all these liberal nationalists, they came to be called revolutionaries, and the main purpose of this was to oppose monarchical form of government and to fight for liberty and freedom. Giuseppe Mazzini, born in Genoa in 1807, he became a member of secret society of the Carbonari. Now this person will be playing a major role in unification of Italy. Later on we'll be studying this chapter. He joined a secret society which was a revolutionary society, and this society's name was Carbonary, because the name Carbonary, because the mostly all the members were working in coal industries, so that is why the name of the society Carbonary. Now Mazzini, he was sent into exile in 1831 for attempting a revolution in Liguria. This Mazzini, he was sent into exile. So he went underground. Now Mazzini believed that God had intended nations to be natural units of mankind. So Mazzini believed that it was God who had intended that all people should be free and the nation should be built and nation should work for the welfare of the people. Secret societies were set up in Germany, France, Switzerland, and Poland. Now, secret societies such as Carbonari were set up everywhere. Mazzini, later on, we'll study during the unification of Italy, he had also found the secret society which was fighting for unification of Italy, and that society's name was Young Italy. Now, Metternich, so he described him as the most dangerous enemy of our social order. Whom did he describe the most? Giuseppe Mazzini. Okay, okay, students, we'll continue from this onwards.